So today I intend to keep this stream relatively brief, but no matter how much I try to keep it brief, it just gets really good and lasts forever. So, you guys know that my father and my brother are pilots. But in case you haven't been here long enough, now you know. Which means that I either hate planes or love them. Because when you grow up in an environment when you hear a lot about that, it's something that you either become fond of or you just end up resenting it. In my case, I did not grow up with my father, so it's not like I owe him anything, but my brother definitely inherited the interest of planes and all that good stuff. So for me, I actually happen to like planes. I like how they look. I like the fact that they exist. I like how they are aerodynamically, as in every single time that I have flown in them, nothing has happened. I have had zero incidents, zero accidents, and all that good stuff. Well, sometimes I get curious. I don't know what happens to me, but sometimes something gets in my head and I start looking up stuff, particularly in video form. And then I end up stumbling on stuff that can be rather dark or it's documentaries based on real events. And I really have a deep appreciation for those because it takes stories that are told with words and it tries to have a reconstruction so that we can have kind of a visual feel of what, based on witness accounts and records, evidence, etc., we can create this picture, especially given technology and, you know, what we have available for us today. However, I couldn't help but notice that when they interview survivors, everybody, of course, I expect, will process such a trauma in their own individual, exclusive way, and they are absolutely respected for that. I cannot say that I have been through such a tragic event that's comparable to such a thing. So it's not like I am trying to say dismiss their feeling or undermine their feeling. But something that I noticed is that whenever they are arriving at their conclusion, they usually phrase it as a very, let's call it religiously inclined or spiritually inclined. I really have to thank God for how lucky I was on that day. I really thank God how amazing this turned out. It could have been a whole lot worse. Or, I'm just really, really grateful for God and everything. And I'm like, as a spiritual person myself, I have no objection with that. But I think it's strange that I honestly feel like these people do not verbally express gratitude to the actual fucking pilot and co pilot who actually made it possible for you to have the experience with that catastrophe that you had. Like, sometimes the pilots cannot fulfill their intent of saving their plane, and that is incredibly tragic. But sometimes in these interviews, throughout the whole thing, of course, interviews are presented in a choppy version, so it's not like in 60 minutes of a program, more like 42, 47, if you have like commercials and whatnot. It's not like you can include every single thing, every single sniff, sigh, sneeze, tear, blink that happens in the interview. You cannot include that in your final cut. But I think it's strange that I find that it's very likely that these people did not actually appreciate the pilot during the interview. Whether the pilot made it or not, because sometimes you can have passengers that survive, but the pilot doesn't. uh, when I hear a lot of thanking to God and very little thanking to the pilots, I can't help but feel some type of way about that because I'm thinking these are people who go through so much preparation, so much to maintain their licenses, obtain their status, and the amount of stress and effort and everything they had to go through to make sure that they made the proper decisions to ensure your safety, or at least boost your chances of survival. And then in the end, it's like some entity that we're not even sure it's there, it hasn't been proven or disproven that it's there, ends up getting all the credit. So I don't want to make a big deal about this. It's really not deep down. It's just me once again observing something, and I bring it here to the channel to share it with you guys and hear what you have to say. Maybe you would be that person, or maybe you would be questioning it like I am, or maybe if you witness that yourself, you'll be like, what the fuck is wrong with this person? Stop thinking God. You have to think more the individuals who actually went through the schooling and that maintained their credentials and took very wise decisions and followed instructions very well to ensure that this did not go as bad as it could, which means nobody makes it. Yeah, so you guys let me know what you think about that one. But I really think it's odd how we tend to, maybe we want to express that gratitude, but we may get timid about it. I personally like to be thankful quite often. I like to tell it to the person involved directly, indirectly, in their presence, not in their presence, and especially reference them a lot. But maybe other people just have their own way of processing things, like I mentioned earlier. It depends on the individual. But because this happens so often in a lot of these shows that interviewed the real folks, and only a handful of them credited the pilots in a way that I consider appropriate. I think that's what triggered this topic, but I don't want to just limit it to like air accidents. It could be in anything. I find that often that people say, "Oh, well, I thank God that this happened. Thank goodness for this. Thank goodness for that." Or say, "My house burned down. Thank you, Lord, that we were away when this happened." It's like, hey, no. Like, if you were away, it's because coincidentally you happened to be away. And on top of that, more people did not get hurt because I'm sure someone saw the fire in your property. Like me, for example, I live in an apartment. If something happens here, the entire building is going to get screwed. So I depend on my neighbors as much as they depend on me to avoid disaster. But if something like that happened, I'm pretty sure that the firemen would be saving some lives around here. So I cannot just sit here and be like, oh, well, thank God that, Dusty was saved. Thank God that my mom was safe. Or let's say that this happens at night and I'm sleeping and some fireman just busts my window open and just snacks me away and saves my life. Like, yeah, sure, I'll be grateful to God because, again, I'm a spiritually inclined person. This is what I do. But I would not forget to actually credit those who were present right there and then. And I'm sure that everybody, if you have access to the person you should be grateful toward, you take the time to do so. But when you're in an interview setting or in a more indirect, informal setting and you're telling the story, are you still saying thanks to the actual people who make this possible? Living, breathing, flesh, blood people who made it possible? Because sometimes I feel like we find too much refuge on the stuff that we don't actually see. And I was just wondering if this happens to you guys or if it's just something random and it has to do with the way the show cut the program that they ultimately released, and that's all we got. But again, I think if you have space to keep the take where the person thanked God a lot, I'm pretty sure you could keep the take in which they were thanking the pilots a lot. But anyway, that's pretty much it from me. I'll see what you guys are saying now. Philip says, I dislike flying, but when I was in the army, I was an airborne ranger. Did that help you process that a little bit, or did that actually make your feelings toward flying worse? Is it because you don't like the sensation of you being airborne, you just hate heights, or both of them? Because for me personally, I like heights. Like, it's not like I'm a fan of them. Like, if I'm looking over a rail and seeing like the freaking road, and I'm on a, I don't know, 5-story building, it feels terrifying, especially if there isn't some kind of rail, some kind of fence to keep you extra safe. If it's just like an open roof type of deal, that is kind of intimidating. But I feel like I fear heights more at a lower level, if that makes sense. Because if I'm really, really, really high up, I feel like if I were to drop from such a height, my consciousness would be altered to where the worst of the worst I probably wouldn't perceive. But when I'm at a proximity to the ground, uh, if I can see the bottom of the ground, I feel like I can, I'll feel the slam more, put it that way, if that makes sense. But I feel like when you're falling from greater heights, stuff just happens to your body. You start getting frozen, or you lose consciousness, like depending on what height you're at. You'll be deprived of oxygen. There's no telling about what kind of G forces might be involved as well. So, it's like it can get so bad that you probably wouldn't even sense anything. Whereas if you're closer to the ground, you are more likely to feel something. But maybe that's just me being weird about it right now. But honestly, I think I fear heights if I can see the immediate ground very clearly. Like if I can see details about the ground. But if I'm really, 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 really high, like from a plane high, it doesn't scare me. Never. Now, what does scare me about being on a plane is that because I know about human factors, I sometimes worry about what your integrity is. Did you get sleep? Do you cut corners? Do you have a good diet? Are you do you physically take care of yourself? That's what I mean more by do you have a good diet? Uh, are you properly rested? Are you dealing with any like demons in the back of your head that we don't know about? What is your emotional state? What is your mental state? Those are things that people can do so well at concealing that even if it affects your performance, there's no way that we can catch it. Or it could be a silent killer. You just don't know when it's going to happen, when it's going to snap. And what if you happen to be there at the wrong place, at the wrong time, with the wrong person? But fortunately, more and more things keep getting implemented to keep an eye out for that. But we're only human. There's only so much that we can do. There's only so many tools that we can develop. Um, and nothing will surpass, of course, the distressed person saying something from the get go, as opposed to us having to guesstimate pretty much by observing. And a lot of people do good about leaving hints no matter what, even if you don't directly exhibit a behavior associated with you being in trouble. Like, say, you're not verbally abusive, you're not uh, just overall crazy looking, restless looking, reckless, stuff like that. Then we tend to be like, okay, definitely we should be concerned about our buddy over here. But outside of that, sometimes I fear that who is in control of this plane? Like, how are you feeling? How are you doing right now? So, especially if you have a schedule that's pretty merciless, like sometimes when you're flying, you can be away from home for weeks. And it sucks. It really does. So, but anyway. Hi, Zam. Hope you're staying safe. Eh, what can I say? I feel alright, but unfortunately, I still have to work and whatnot, so I feel like I am not doing my very best at keeping myself safe, but I have faith that it'll be all right. I can't say that I feel like the worst of it has happened, but I feel more well than not, and hopefully it stays that way because your girl needs a break. Thanking God after surviving a disaster seems to be a knee jerk reaction. You are almost expected to thank God. It's the height, speed, and the fact that I am a giant heavy tube of steel built by flawed humans. And I still dislike flying. Yeah. Um, I feel like if I were to be involved in a traumatic event, such as an air crash, I would definitely have my opinion altered a little bit and be like, you know what, maybe I should go some 10, 15 to 20 years without flying. But I also feel like, you know what, it is highly unlikely that this happens again. But then I think about, I forget her name, but there was this one lady in the Titanic who she survived the sinking of the Titanic, and then she got on the, I think, the Olympic, and that mug sunk too. And then she also got on the Britannic, and that one also sank. Did I say sunk? I meant sank. Anyways, all of those sinkings she survived. So I'm thinking, what's to keep this from happening to me? You know, oh yeah, I survived one air crash. Okay, then the second, then the third one. And then for the third one, it's like, oh, well, maybe I'm not so lucky this time because I crashed into the ocean. But then all of a sudden, there happens to be just something that pulls me out of the water and I'm still alive. And it's like, fantastic. That is definitely a guardian angel. Something like that would reinforce my what is it, spiritual beliefs of greater entities and higher powers and whatnot. But at the same time, I'll be like, hey, yo, man, thank you for being here at the right place at the right time. Because if it weren't for you, I wouldn't have made it. So in that situation, I guess I can be like, oh, thank God I survived, but also thank you for being there. That's the kind of person I am. Like, just like Philip said, yeah, you pretty much, that's a knee jerk reaction. That's the first thing you do. But I feel like I would add a modifier. And I say that based on my experiences. Like, there was one time when I had issues at work when it came to my health, and my mom happened to be off, and that lady is never off. And she was able to come to my rescue, and I had a better day as a result. So I was like, oh, thank goodness that you're here, but also thank goodness that you are here. Like, thank you for being here. Because if it weren't for you being off on this day and you being able to come for me, there's no telling what would have happened to me in that time that I was struggling. And only mom really knew how to help me. So, you know, it's, I get what you're saying, but at the same time, it's like, don't forget to actually thank the human who was involved in your rescue. Because it's very easy to let that slip if you get caught up in your, I guess, emotion and like attachment to religion. Nothing wrong with it, but again, noticing this so much in those interviews, it kind of left me like, what? Does this really happen a lot in real life? Or was that just an editing thing? Um, let's see. I'm glad for you. I cannot really get a break. I live with someone with underlying health issues, so I cannot take any chances. Definitely. Like, mom has been so on top of it all the time. She's like, oh, I just read about what they consider to be a possible treatment for it. If you exhibit these symptoms, this is how you fight them, this is what you do. And I couldn't help but just tell her, Mom, let's think about this for a second. Do you think that this could have been absolutely contained if people actually applied the stuff that they were supposed to have learned, retained, and be applying up to this point? Like, when you're a kid, they're always telling you, do not touch your face when your hands are dirty. Make sure that you wash your hands thoroughly and often. And when you're sick, This is what you do. Make sure that you don't, spread germs without meaning to, and make sure that you are mindful about your hygiene and the hygiene of your surroundings, because surfaces need to be cleaned and whatnot. But at my job, for instance, like I said a few days ago, I am glad that this happened in a sense, because I have never seen my establishment so clean. It's almost like shit. It's almost tempting to when I eat straight off the floor, for how clean it is. But of course, we're not gonna do that. And please don't start that eat from the floor challenge, because someone out there would probably consider it. But it's like, just like they say that out of everything bad, something good comes out. I see what the good stuff that's coming out of this is, but at the same time, I think this could have been so much better handled. It could have been more easily prevented if we would have ensured that we take certain measures. But I feel like it isn't until you feel that your life is in danger that you don't start taking things seriously. And then something else that kind of stands out to me is that we see more of the vulnerable people in society, say folks who are disabled and folks who are immunocompromised. But at the same time, I'm thinking, well, those of us who do not fit into those categories, yeah, we can be pretty caught up in how we feel, like our temporary discomfort. Whereas for these people, this is their reality every single day. And for us to have our limitations imposed, imagine that there is a group in society that experiences those challenges and limitations multiplied. That, it's really easy to dismiss sometimes, really easy to not think about sometimes. But other times I think, well, what would have been the best way to go about this? Because even if you had those perfect habits of, you stay clean, you're pretty much a germaphobe. You make sure that you're on top of your game when it comes to your personal hygiene and everything. But would that really have guaranteed that this would not have gotten out of control? It's definitely altering the way we conduct ourselves. It's altering certain procedures that we do at work, for instance. Like, our already extensive cleaning log definitely has expanded. And it's definitely for good reason. But sometimes I think, why would you want to revert to the way things were if the way things were allowed for this to happen? Maybe these changes needed to happen. But hopefully, this means that people will continue to live like there's a monster out there that's going to get us. Going to get us? Eh. Because, this is not something that's going to go away. It's not like, all of a sudden, let's wait 18 months or something, live like this for 18 months, and then after that, the Rona is going to be absolutely gone. Like, not at all. This thing is going to continue to linger. But hopefully, what I would like is for people to think more critically about this, as opposed to just being like, okay, let me embrace my life as it used to be. Actually learn something, actually retain something. Don't be extra washing your hands now just because that's what everybody's recommending, and just because that's a part of your job, in the event that you still have a job and this is applicable to you. But it just, there is a lot of childhood advice that you get that could make your life so much more simple, and on top of that, you're taking care of people as you go. But stuff like this has to happen in order for you to process that. Why? you know but anyway, I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm pretty confident about my habits. For the first time ever, I have been working from home. I enjoy isolation as much as the next socially dysfunctional person, but I do miss having a choice. Definitely. I think that is what is making people go crazy the most. The fact that they feel like let's take this country for example. I got my freedom. I got my choices. You know, you can't limit me. I'll never forget this one lady who posted something on Twitter about how she was really proud that she was sitting in at a restaurant, just ordering some food, and then people were pretty much jumping her, saying, "You are so inconsiderate. You should not be." This is, of course, before the lockdowns of dining rooms and all that became a thing. But pretty much she was boasting about it. I feel like she was wrong. She was like, in my country, I get to enjoy eating out whenever I want to. I decide where to go, how to spend, what to wear, when, etc. Just being like that. And then everybody was pretty much jumping her online, going like, "Hey, man, you're part of the problem. You're people like you in society are the reason why things are the way they are." Stuff like that, which I agree. At the same time, what's going to happen when, I guess, the prompt for us to go back to normal happens? Like, for instance, the movie theater, I'm pretty sure that mug's gonna be drowning. Restaurants, they're the surviving ones, they're pretty much going to be lit. The beach, if this happens while the weather is warm, that's definitely going to get packed. And just in the same manner that there was a big mess once this whole lockdown started, imagine what's going to happen when that stuff is lifted. I mean, and traveling, are you kidding me? All the people who had to cancel their plans, they're going to be trying to, if they're in the position to, they're going to try to make up for that. So I feel like flying won't be the same for like 5 years or so. Maybe I'm underestimating it, but humans tend to react like that. You feel like you have to make up for losses, no matter how petty some of them are. But just like you said, when it comes to having a choice, it is important because shit, at least speaking for myself, I work so fucking hard, and yet I work hard in the field that doesn't support me to be living a life of pleasure, as I guess the American values encompass. But for me, at the same time, I'm like, no, I'm happy the way I am. I get to go home. I have a pretty predictable schedule for the most part. Like, I can elect certain things, and the job that I have doesn't make me stay up at night. It doesn't fatigue me more than I can actually handle. The only downside is when it becomes excessive. Excess affects any human. And what I do when that happens is I take control. If I have to do a little bit of switching up, I do it. If I gotta take a couple of days away, I do it. Just without really worrying about the reason why I work, which is if I don't work, I don't survive because I'm one paycheck away from homelessness. That's totally unacceptable. But those are my values. It's like when challenges arise, I am confident that I have what it takes to resolve it. So I don't live my life in that kind of fear, you know? But at the same time, when this kind of thing happens, I'm thinking, wow, what would I have done if I would have fallen under the category of folks who lose their jobs? And of course, I still had to pay rent on the first, every single penny. I still have all of my other dues due in the same manner as always. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I had to be at the right place at the right time, right position, and just write it out. And now that this happened, I look at my job and it's like, although I hate it and I complain about it a lot, I've always sensed that it's not bad. Like, it's not terrible. It could be a whole lot worse. It could really be the definition of shit. But when I think about it critically, I'm like, nah, because this is definitely the lesser of all evils from my perspective. And it works out for me. So if it works out for me just fine, what else do I want? You know? But anyway, that's just me. That's my take on it. Not everybody can live like that, and that's fine. This is what works for me, but everybody else will have different criteria, especially depending on your circumstances. Hey, Jimmy. Goodbye, off to work. See you next time. See you next time. I have been coping with the craziness by thinking of things to do when this is over, something to look forward to. That too, there's that feeling of having something to look forward to, and that actually takes up a lot of my time. But when I think about it, this hasn't really changed a whole lot about my life. The only thing that's different is that on Sundays when I go on dates, I don't get to sit in at restaurants, but I'm happy about that because that means that I can stay comfortable. I can just pick something up, come home, and just go back to my comfort zone. Like, I spend most of my time at home anyway. But for people who are very different from me, like those people who are outgoing and you absolutely need to be having a social time, you need to go places and stuff. This is fucking you up. I have no doubt about it. But for me, especially the implementation of physical distance amongst everybody, this is paradise for me. I couldn't be happier. Because now people are so mindful about being in your space, whereas in the past, people had very little regard. And now, the folks who still have little regard get called out on it, and it is amazing. It's glorious. I enjoy every second of it. But anyway, that's just that dark side of me. But again, those are habits that I have had for a long time, and now it turns out that the discipline that I already possessed happens to be the most proper for encountering and dealing with this kind of situation. So maybe that's why I say I haven't been affected in any way. The only thing that's changed is that work has gotten a little tougher because a lot of people ain't showing up, and the demand for our labor certainly increased. So, needless to say, work feels like you have triple the responsibilities. There is the holiday demand, and now this is the emergency demand, which I had never experienced before. But it's worse than the holiday rush because this is a rush, holiday rush that's happening indefinitely. Whereas for the holidays, you have projections to support you. You're like, yeah, sure. Uh, that Thursday in November, the days leading up to it are going to suck. The days after it is going to be a desert. December, the days leading up to the 24th is definitely gonna suck. The 25th, everything's going to be dead. Nobody's working. And then New Year's, you have dates that you can be like, okay, I can expect a little bit of chaos. But with something like this, something that comes out of nowhere and you had no preparation for, yeah, this drains you. This is supposed to be the season when we are chilling. Probably this weekend we could have expected a little more business than usual since there's that Easter stuff going on. But yeah, usually it's dead until maybe July. Uh, Maybe that weekend or so before the 4th of July. And August, nothing happens in August except back to school. So, again, there's projections for all of that, but for this, there's no projections. And I think that's the part that's making this draining, more draining than usual. Well, guys, that's pretty much it for me. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that I made sense. I hope that you saw a little bit of the point I was trying to make there. I'm not even sure where I wanted to go with this, but I think it was more about expressing something that people do that I found kind of odd now that I see this as an outsider, like being the member of the audience as opposed to being someone involved in a discussion. I just couldn't help but notice that. It was just standing out to me. Like, oh, thank God for this, thank God for that. I'm like, no, what about the people who actually made this possible? It's not like these people sit on that cabin and they just hope that you make it where you want to get to. There is so much that goes on to make your trip possible. So, like, at the very least, acknowledge them a minimum of 10 times anytime you discuss what you just went through. Anyway, well, guys, this is it for me. I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.